What a blessing it is to see children and to hold them and to take care of them. I know it gets to be a burden sometimes for you parents, but enjoy them while they're at home. My kids are grown up. One is in Jerusalem and one is in St. Paul, Minnesota, and that seems far away. Christ is risen.
He is risen indeed. Hallelujah!
Today, we know that life wins. Today, we also know that love wins. People might call us crazy, April's Fool people, because we believe that death will never have the final word. We Christians truly believe that death is not the end. In fact, we believe that it's the beginning of life where we are with God in person and we would enjoy peace unto eternity. Now, if you want to call us foolish people, that's okay. That's kind of where we are. And we don't make that up. It comes from the Bible and it comes from real experience. Today you heard the story of Jesus rising from the dead. If you were here on Good Friday just 2 days ago, we remembered Jesus' crucifixion. And all that, in a sense, was part of God's plan. And today I want to take you through a very, very quick trip through the Bible. I'm skipping a lot of stuff, but I want to start with Genesis. When you think of Genesis, what do you think about? Creation? Right. So God created what is just the most wonderful thing. I don't know how many of you were early enough. When I came to church this morning, the moon was full, and it was on what seemed like, I think, the southwest side of the sky. It was just the most beautiful moon I've ever seen. On the other side, in the east, the sun was rising. And it takes your breath away. You know God created this amazing, amazing creation. And God loved this creation. And God created human beings and expected them to follow his direction. So we have the Garden of Eden, which represents all of the universe, if you wish. And Adam and Eve representing all of humanity. And God says you can enjoy everything except the one tree, right? And of course, that's the one tree they decide to try. And so at the end of that, we see God's judgment. In chapter 3, verse 19, God says to the man, "By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." None of us like to hear this, but we know that's our experience, isn't it? Life is not easy, it's tough. Later on, we see God actually clothing Adam and Eve, making clothes for them. So God is a gracious God, is a loving God, and people tend to forget that. The next thing you see when you get to the second book in the Bible, which is Exodus, there you see the Israelites had become slaves in Egypt, and they're carrying heavy burdens, and they cry out to God, and God delivers them. God saves them. God liberates them from slavery. And they are now in Mount Sinai, and God gives them the 10 Commandments, and he says, "I give you these because I love you. I want you to continue to be a free person in the world, and if you obey these commandments, you will be fine. Now let's make a covenant between us." And they make a covenant, and part of what happens is now the Ark of the Covenant develops, and in the Ark of the Covenant is where these 10 Commandments were put, the 2 tablets that had the 10 Commandments. Now, I want you to quickly go to the New Testament. When Mary enters the tomb, first of all, let me ask you, how many of you know what was on top of the Ark of the Covenant? Any of you know? Just shout it out. Seraphims, angels, exactly. There were 2 angels, one at the head, one at the foot. And so when Mary enters the tomb, who does she see? 2 angels. One sitting at the head of where Jesus was lying, and one sitting at the feet. What does that tell you? If you were a Jew, what do you right away think about? This is the new Ark of the Covenant. This is the new covenant. God is doing something completely new. And what God is doing, God is saying, you can't do it on your own anymore. You've messed up over and over and over again. Now I'm going to save you on my own. And God comes to humanity in the form of his son, Jesus, who takes flesh, our flesh. Now I want to take you back to the Gospel of John. Gospel of John in the New Testament. We read the reading of the resurrection of Jesus from the Gospel of John. The Gospel of John begins with these words in Greek. It says, En arche ho logos. In the beginning was the Word. The Word is Jesus. It goes on to say that everything that was created through Jesus. The moon that I saw this morning, the sun, everything was created through Jesus. Not one thing was created without him. So this one who created everything came down to earth, became a human being, healed people, even brought people back from death to life, cast out evil, challenged authorities, and finally he's willing to go to the cross as a criminal when he didn't deserve it. What we see here is God taking flesh and saying, I am doing what I want to do because I love you. The world that we live in is evil. People are hurting each other in ways that are horrendous. And that's not acceptable to me. But I want you to know that I know what's happening. And I want you to know that whenever you go through something horrible, that I've gone through it with you. I will never leave you. I will never forsake you. So Jesus is crucified. He dies. They see him dead. They bury him. They roll the stone on the tomb where he was buried. And on the third day, Mary comes looking, and she finds that the tomb had been opened up, and she thinks that Jesus was stolen. Even though they heard Jesus saying so many times, I'm going to rise again, they don't get it. They don't expect it because it doesn't make sense. And the only thing she thinks about, somebody stole Jesus. So when she bumps into the gardener, who was the gardener in the Garden of Eden? God. When she bumps into this gardener, she thinks he's the gardener. She says, where have you hid him? Tell me so I can bring him back and take care of him. And Mary does not recognize Jesus until he says her name. In Hebrew, Miriam. And then she recognizes him, and she wants to touch him. She wants to worship him. And Jesus says, not yet. So the early Christians were not foolish. They believed in the resurrection because they saw Jesus. It was a fact. And it wasn't only once. It was for how many days? 40 days. They had proof. They saw it. No one could convince them otherwise. They saw Jesus. They ate with him. They listened to him. And so when the early Christians who were Jews followed Jesus, it's because they were really convinced that he's real and he's alive even after he died. And then they're willing to die for Jesus. So as you think about what's happening in the world today, you have people who are acting on their faith because they believe that death has been defeated. God has defeated death. And we're here on earth for a purpose. You think of Martin Luther King Jr., who 50 years ago on Wednesday was assassinated. He was a man who believed in Jesus, and he believed in nonviolence to make change happen. He knew he was going to be killed. He just didn't know when. But he kept working, right? He kept working until he was killed. He believed he was here on earth for a purpose, and all those who followed him and continue to follow his example are doing the same thing. Just recently, as you know, 17 young children and teachers were killed, assassinated, murdered. And right away, I mean, we all feel for what's happening, but we have these young youth from that Florida school who moved a whole movement into saying this is wrong, something has to change. Do you think God is active in that? Some people believe that we should do everything we can to make a difference because we shouldn't even be afraid of death because death is not the end. Now, the world continues to be evil. And here's where Jesus looks at you and he says to you, whom are you looking for? You and I, when we come to church and we come to Jesus, we come to God, we know what we're looking for. We're looking for someone who would forgive us our wrong deeds. I mean, you and I, we know what we've done wrong. It just seems like it doesn't go away. We just think about it and we're embarrassed, we're ashamed. We come to Jesus who died for us. We come to a God who loves us unconditionally. And this God says, I don't want you to be in bondage to that sin. I make you free. Just like God liberated the Israelites from slavery in Egypt, and that's what they celebrate in the Passover. I make you free. And then you look at your relationships at home, at work, in the community, and then God says, what are you going to do about it? There are things that are broken here. What will you do about it? And then you look at your relationship with God, the God we're too busy for, to have any kind of relationship with God. And so God says, what do you want to do? I love you. I want to be your friend. I want to walk with you. Well, the other part, I think we come to this day because we hope that death is not the end. We hope that death is not the end. The last book in the Bible is Revelation. Pastor Leland read you from that book, which is in your bulletin. God, this is a vision, right, during hard times. The early church was persecuted. The early Christians were mostly Jews, and they were losing hope. But the apostles saw a vision of heaven where God says, I'm going to be with you in person. There will be a new creation. There will be a new beginning. And there will be no more death on the other side. There will be no more pain, no more grieving, no more suffering. And if you cry, I will wipe away your tears, God says. And with that kind of message, you and I leave here with a purpose. Now, each one of us has something to do. It's up to you what you're going to do about it, right? I look at where I grew up and what's happening there, and it just pains me to see what's going on. So just a couple of days ago, 17 young Palestinians were also shot and killed. But notice in the news media and in the world, no one pays attention. So there's depravity and there's differences, right, on how we treat the world. So that's where you and I come in. What will we do to make a difference in the life of people who have no power? A life of people who are oppressed. Whatever it is, there are just so many issues. We can spend hours talking about it today. But you and I have a mission. We have to go out there and do something. And God will reveal to you what your mission is. You just have to be open to say, I will do that. And I know, Jesus, you will walk with me. You will be with me. Death will not have a final word. So today we shout it out. Death, you're dead. Thanks be to God. Amen.